Top speed has been a big talking point in these new regulations ever since we've had the engine freeze. The only way to make your car go faster in a straight line is aerodynamically or mechanically. We've already seen the famous triple DRS trick that Red Bull has used, but what if I told you they were using another trick to be able to lower the rear part of their car, and now another 4 teams with Red Bull have been able to use this trick, which actually helps them in top speed and in low speed cornering. Formula 1 teams will find any advantage they can get, but this trick rides on whether it's legal or not, with technical experts even saying this trick is probably illegal. But before getting into the bigger part, wanted to thank you guys so much for the support on the videos and on the channel, and overall making my day with the comments and how this community is received for my channel. So thank you for that. And if you're new here, please subscribe. It would mean the world to me. We're killing it. We're getting close to 50K, as I keep saying, and the support has been tremendous. So let's get into the trick being used by these 5 teams and why it's on that border of legal or not. The ground effect regulations we've had since 2022 have been very strict on the cars. In 2021 and even before that, in that era of cars, teams were able to squat the rear part of their car, Mercedes being the famous one, with certain springs they were using to be able to get a huge top speed advantage. Obviously losing downforce in the car, but shredding drag to be faster in a straight line. The Mercedes also had a very powerful engine, so that helped with that, but every car ended up actually using this trick by the end of it, which was then outlawed in 2022 within the rear suspension. So it was going to be very tricky for teams to be able to actually use any type of advantage in the suspension to gain top speed. The Red Bull has always been the fastest car in a straight line. Now it's much closer. Aston Martin seems to be the fastest team, but I'll tell you right now, Aston is actually not using the trick that the other 5 are. The teams currently using this trick aren't maybe what you suspected. Red Bull is obviously one of them. They are the ones that have invented this system, and now others have pretty much perfected it. This article comes from Auto Motorsport, and they talk about the trick with lowering the rear. Red Bull is the team that invented it. Ferrari is now using that trick as well. We have Mercedes also on that trend. And with the other teams being RB, who now has the rear and front suspension of the Red Bull, the RB19 to be specific. And Haas has actually now started using it since the Miami GP. Ferrari has actually mastered this trick so far, and they seem to be the team at the top in performing the trick to be able to lower the rear in straight line. Red Bull was obviously the first team to use it, and it was evident that this was their extreme top speed advantage. With that DRS effectiveness they had, it was a combination of that and obviously being able to perfect the rear part of their car when other teams could not. Mercedes was desperately down in top speed in both 22 and 23, but have now found their way towards a more middle ground. It's not going to make them jump all the way to the top with 5 teams already using it. We also have teams like RB and Haas, Haas being a super fast car in a straight line. This could also have to do with the floor not being as complex as the other teams, but then RB is one of the slowest teams. So while this trick does work, it helps in different areas as well. What the teams are doing in these strict technical rules to be able to actually achieve this. Since 2022, only conventional chassis are permitted, that is, disc springs, coil springs, or torsion bar springs. This has made the development of suspension and being able to work on that rear part of the car very difficult, both in the front and the rear, to actually extract more top speed. As I said, we saw in 22 and 23 that Red Bull was definitely the fastest car in the straight line, with its DRS advantage and what it was able to pull off while still being fast in medium, high, and low speed corners. The teams were able to figure out that switching to torsion bar springs was actually more effective than the old-fashioned disc springs that they were previously using. The teams that are still using this old-fashioned system is your Aston Martin, your Alpine, McLaren is another one of these teams, as well as Sauber and Williams. They have still to see the advantages in using torsion bar springs. And while these do add a few kilos and are the heavier system, it's much more adaptable and it allows you to lower the rear part of the car much more effectively. Red Bull has always had the lowest ride height. When you look at the cars in the high-speed advantage, that has been something they've been able to have throughout the start of this regulation period. We've now seen that be a problem with the curbs, but then also Ferrari has been super strong and probably the best car at taking these curbs. Cars have about 100mm freedom between the bottom of their car and the track surface to allow them to go over curbs confidently and keep control of the car. But because of this trick and being able to now manipulate the ride height to be a bit higher, with you being able to lower the rear to have that fast top speed, teams have been able to use this in a way where they can set up the car higher to be now better on mechanical grip through these curbs and slow speed corners, specifically Ferrari, and that's why they've been able to master what Red Bull has pretty much invented. We've seen this advantage be tremendous in Monaco, and hence why Red Bull suffered a lot. Marco has even talked about that the car has to be really low, and that's how the Red Bull is set up to get all of its advantages in every single corner, and Monaco is one of those outlier tracks that really hurts them. Canada could be the same thing. Teams like McLaren that have been really strong that don't use this advantage have Andrea Stella talking about it, saying that he's not confident that using torsion springs will actually give you an advantage. He says, "We do not have an explicit lowering device. This can be crucial with low ground clearance. You can quickly lose downforce in places where you don't want to." That does seem to be the problem that Red Bull is having. While it is the strongest car and there are minimal problems on the car, it does make sense that this can sometimes happen with their setup, regardless of how big that window is, and why we see sometimes the Red Bull car is struggling. But this begs the question in which experts like Craig Scarsborough saying, how is this legal? Seeing this article, he mentions, I'm not sure how this can be illegal with springs according to Tech Reg 10.4.3a. Now reading 10.4.3, which he ended up actually pointing out to us, thank you Craig for that, the only permitted suspension elements are, and you can read it if you want to, but I want to outline what is the most important part, and which actually makes me think that this isn't legal, but there seems to be a way that teams have found out a gray area. To generate a single spring element entity between its nodes, providing the result as measured at the nodes, conforms to the monotonic requirement above, and no part of the design has the purpose or effect of altering this relationship. Spring elements using a fluid medium are not permitted. Basically saying there should be no part of the suspension that's actually altering that ride height in between a session, which makes me think and agree with Craig that this should not be allowed onto the car. But people have pointed out that the Ferrari just passed the scrutineering, so I guess they must have found something of a legal gray area, and Red Bull has also been using the system since 2022, and there have never been any other precautions behind it. This chassis trick is really interesting, and it's great that Automotor has actually been able to come out with something like this, and we see the effects it's giving on cars. Some cars being able to take curbs even better, and with another 5 teams still not taking advantage of what seems to be the much more effective setup in the car in comparison to the old-fashioned disc springs. But I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. What is your thoughts on this new suspension trick, and do you really think this is something beneficial to the teams? It always has seemed like Red Bull has had the jump, but now teams have finally caught on in year 3. It's taken teams all the way up until now, like Ferrari, like your Mercedes, and now Haas. RB was able to catch up in the last part of the season because of them actually implementing the rear suspension, but other teams like Ferrari and Mercedes have had to wait all the way up until year 3 to finally find out torsion springs are the best setup. It seems like a simple change, but there's much more complications that I obviously can't figure out without knowing what's inside of the car, and with all the data the teams have, they know what they're doing. But this is definitely something interesting to talk about. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below with this top speed advantage, and it could play a big part even into the new regulations as teams seem to be more onto this. Let me know what you think down below. Please leave a like and subscribe. You guys mean the world, and peace.